Customs of the Tagalogs. Learning objectives. Historical context. During the first century of Spanish rule, the colonial government had difficulty in running local politics because of the limited number of Spaniards who wanted to live outside of Intramuros. This situation forced Spanish officials to allow Filipinos to hold the position of gobernadorcillo to ensure that the gobernadorcillos would remain loyal to the crown. The friars assigned in the parishes were instructed to supervise and monitor the activities of the former. Hence, the friars ended up performing the administrative duties that colonial officials should have been doing at the local. They supervised the election of the local executives, helped in the collection of taxes, were directly involved in educating the youth, and performed other civic duties. Consequently, the friars became the most knowledgeable and influential figure in the pueblo. The friars who were assigned in mission territories were required periodically to inform their superiors of what was happening in their respective areas. They prepared reports on the number of natives they converted, the people's way of life, their socio-economic situation, and the problems they encountered. Some of them submitted short letters, while others who were keen observers and gifted writers wrote long dispatches. On top of the regular reports they submitted, they also shared their personal observations and experiences. Placente's Relation de las Costumbres de los Tagalogs, Customs of the Tagalogs, 1589, is an example of this kind of work. It contains numerous information that historians could use in reconstructing the political and socio-cultural history of the Tagalog region. His work is a primary source because he personally witnessed the events, and his account contained his observation. There were other friars and colonial officials who also wrote about the Filipinos, which could further enrich our knowledge of Philippine history during the early part of the Spanish period. For example, Miguel de Lorca, an encomendero Panay, quote his Relación de las Islas Filipinas 1582, and described the Filipinos' way of life in the western Visayas area. Lieutenant Governor Antonio de Morga wrote Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, which provides information about the state of the Philippines in the latter part of the 16th century. The other Spanish missionaries who continued the historiographical tradition were Fr. Pedro Carino S.J., Relación de las Islas Filipinas, 1604, Fr. Juan Delgado S.J., Historia General, 1751, Fr. Francisco Colon S.J., Labor Evangelica, 1663, and Fr. Francisco Ignacio Alcina S.J., Historia Natural del Sitio, Fertilidad y Calidad de las Islas y Indios de Visayas, 1668. Most of what we know about Philippine history during the first century of the Spanish period were derived from the accounts of the Spanish friars. Background of the author. Miguel Juan de Plasencia was a Spanish friar of the Franciscan order. He was among the first group of Franciscan missionaries who arrived in the Philippines on the 2nd of July, 1578. He spent most of his missionary life in the Philippines, where he founded numerous towns in Luzon and authored several religious and linguistic books, most notably the Doctrina Christiana, Christian Doctrine, the first book ever printed in the Philippines. About text. The original document of customs of the Tagalogs is currently kept in the Archivo General de Indias in Seville, Spain. A duplicate copy of it is kept in the Archivo Franciscano Ibero Oriental F1O in Madrid, Spain. An English translation appeared in Volume 7 of the Blair and Robertson's The Philippine Islands. Another English translation was published as part of the volume for pre-colonial Philippines in the second series of the Filipiniana Book Guild. The excerpts presented below is from the latter version. Excerpts from Customs of the Tagalogs, Social Classes, Government, Dowries, Superstitious Beliefs, Religious Beliefs, Worships of the Tagalogs. Social Classes. Ta-2. This people always had chiefs, called by them datos, who governed them and were captains in their wars, and whom they obeyed and reverenced. The subject who committed any offense against them or spoke but a word to their wives and children was severely punished. These chiefs rule over a few people, sometimes as many as 100 houses, sometimes even less than 30. This tribal gathering is called in Tagalog a barangay. It was inferred that the reason for giving themselves this name rose from the fact as they are classed, by their language, among the Malay nations, that when they came to this land, the head of the barangay, which is a boat, thus called, as is discussed at length in the first chapter of the first 10 chapters, became the dato. And so, even at present day, it is ascertained that the barangay in its origin was a family of parents, children, relations, and slaves. There were many of these barangays in each town, or at least, on account of wars, they did not settle far from one another. Except in friendship and relationship, the chiefs, in their various wars, helped one another with their respective barangays. In addition to these chiefs, who corresponded to our knights, there were 3 castes, nobles, commoners, and slaves. The nobles were the freeborn whom they call Maharlika. They did not pay tax or tribute to the dato, but must accompany him in war at their own expense. The commoners are called a liping namamahe. They are married and serve their master, whether he be a dato or not, with half of their cultivated lands, as was agreed upon in the beginning. The slaves are called a liping sagwigwheeler. They serve their master in his house and on his cultivated lands, and may be sold. The unit of government is called barangay, ruled by a chieftain, and consists of 30 to 100 families together with their relatives and slaves. The chieftain's executive function includes implementing laws, ensuring order, and giving protection. His subjects' disputes between individuals were settled by a court made up of a chieftain and council of elders. A person becomes a slave by captivity, in a war by reason of debt, by inheritance, by purchase, by committing a crime. A slave can be emancipated by forgiveness, by paying debt, by condemnation, by bravery, where a slave can possibly become a dato, or by marriage. Men are in general monogamous, while their wife are called asawa courtship, begins with Pananobian. Prior to the marriage, the man requires to give a dowry bigay kaya, pangihimuit bigay, suso. Marriage between couples belonging to a different social classes were not common. Several grounds of divorce are adultery, abandonment on the part of the husband, cruelty, insanity. The first son of the chieftain inherit his father position. If the first son dies, the second son succeeds their father. In the absence of male heirs, it is the eldest daughter becomes the chieftain. Religious beliefs. Superstitious beliefs. The contents of the writing of Fray on de Plasencia depicts the ancient or pre-colonial life of the Filipinos before and upon the arrival of Spain, as embodied in Plasencia's detailed narration of how was the life of Filipinos during this time. It just proved that these occurrences, beliefs, and practices had been existing long before the arrival of Spaniards. Hence, it is appropriate to debunk the Western depiction of the islands as barbaric and civilized and uncultured when they arrived. Based on Plasencia's observation, the Tagalogs are already highly civilized and have a sophisticated as described in Plasencia's report. The document custom of the Tagalogs had contributed much to the understanding of the culture and heritage of the Filipinos in a way that it provided us with significant and meaningful information to better appreciate and be proud of the cultural legacy from our ancestors. It served as the basis of historical reconstruction of Tagalog society. Many of the 16th century beliefs and practices are still present today. It affirms that during the pre-Hispanic period, Filipinos already have government as well as a set of beliefs and practices wherein we can still observe today.